Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be analyzing chapters 7 and 8 of Hatchet. So we find Brian after he was able to find some cherries. He ate a lot of them, and we begin opening up this scene with the consequences of him eating so much. So the first word in this chapter is mother in all caps with an exclamation point. He's screaming it. Um, he wants his mom. You probably have been in a situation where you're sick and all you want is your mom. Well, remember, Brian is in the wilderness. He's all by himself and he's been awakened with stomach pain. And we go into very vivid detail of what happens when you eat too many. He later calls them gut cherries. So he gets very, very ill. And after he finishes being sick, he remembers an incident where he saw his mom kissing another man. And this is kind of the uh, turning point of what caused his parents' marriage to end, why Brian is even here in the wilderness because his parents divorced and his father moved to the Canadian wilderness, so he's on an airplane to go see his father. So this incident is very important in the fact that it sort of caused um, Brian to be where he's at now. And so that is what he is remembering. And he continues to be pretty ill throughout chapter 7 because he ate too many cherries. Um, Later, he actually tries to find more food and he finds raspberries. So he does find something to eat and he's able to eat some yummy raspberries. And this is also when he sees a bear. So bears like berries as well. And so as he is picking his raspberries and actually saving some for later, he sees a bear. And what do you do when you see a bear? You take off running because it's a bear. So he runs all the way back to um, it says he runs about 50 yards and finally stops and realizes that if the bear wanted to eat him, it would have. Um, but this is as one of the points in the story where he realizes he has to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on around him. He can't get so absorbed in something like picking berries that he doesn't notice that there is a bear right there. So, it says he moved with great caution, and when a squirrel rustled some pine needles at the base of a tree, he nearly jumped out of his skin. So you see, he's starting to pay more attention to his surroundings, which is going to be key to his survival later. And so that is pretty much all of chapter 7, all about Brian finding the consequences from eating too many berries, finding more berries, and then realizing he has got to be really careful and pay attention as he is out and about in the woods. So then, chapter 8. Poor Brian can't really catch a break, so he wakes up because he hears a noise, and then he smells something, and the smell was one of rot, some musty rot that made him think of graves with cobwebs and dust and old death. So once again, our author is giving us lots of sensory details in this story to make us feel like we are there with Brian. And you have to remember, Brian is alone in the woods. It's nighttime. He can't see anything. I don't know if you've ever been out in the woods alone, um, or even not necessarily alone, but out in the woods at night. It is very, very dark. And at the end of the previous chapter, it said that it had started to rain. So there are clouds covering the moon, which makes it even more difficult to see. And so Brian is very vulnerable at this point. So something wakes him up. He smells a smell. And of course, the first thing he thinks is bear because of the incident that he had before. Um, then he throws his hatchet because he hears a sound and he notices sparks, but then there's a pain in his leg. And so he screams. He goes to the back corner of the shelter, and then the animal or whatever it is that he hears goes out of the door opening. And then he realizes that had been a porcupine, and the porcupine drove needles all into his leg, or the porcupine quills. And you can imagine that that is not a pleasant sensation. So he has to pull one by one all of the porcupine quills out of his leg. So he's in a pretty sad predicament and realizes he has got to have something change so that he can survive just a little bit better. He lays down, he dreams, he thinks of his father, and then that his dream, they are pointing out, his friend Terry is pointing out fire, and it's as if they're trying to tell him something. And he can't figure out what they're trying to tell him about fire other than he knows that he needs it. He wants fire. It's going to help him. But then he realizes and remembers when he threw his hatchet, it made sparks. And so he realizes that inside the cave, the rock wall, there is flint rock and it makes sparks. And so he is determined now to make fire so that he can survive just a little bit better. So something bad happens, the porcupine, but something good comes from that because he realizes he has a way to make fire. So that is chapter 7 and 8. We'll rejoin you for chapter 9.